This is probably going to be like one of the most controversial opinions that I have.
Here we go.
If I had the ability to deposit my Bitcoin into something like a Fidelity and I could withdraw it when I, want to, for something like a very long-term storage, to not have to worry about losing my private keys or like my house catching on fire, and losing stuff, like to have like that, trust, I guess, like given to something like Fidelity for that stuff, it's kind of enticing, honestly.
Welcome to Good for Bitcoin, a weekly show recorded live every Friday where we recap the top events of the week and talk about everything that is good for Bitcoin. If it's built on Bitcoin, then it's good for Bitcoin. Let's get started. Content shared on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute financial, investment, or legal advice. The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guests and do not reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, or company. We encourage you to conduct your own research and consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Good for Bitcoin. My name is Brandon, and I am very excited to kick off the show on a Thursday, special day. The show must go on, as they say. Kate, how was your week?
It was a crazy busy week, but it's been good. Bitcoin world seems kind of slow. I think, honestly, I always mean to check the price before we start the show, and then I forget to. So I have no idea what the price is at, but I feel like I've heard rumors that it's back up.
It's up. I have one of the. It's not like an official block clock, but I have like one of those like desk toy price ticker things.
Yeah.
So the price is always in front of me. We are currently at 111,000, and yeah, I was actually just thinking about this this week too. It's pretty great that the price is boring at $111,000. It's a good place to be.
Exactly, and it's funny because you look at this now as almost as a dip, where however many years ago we first started buying, I forget the original price that I bought it at. I mean, it was in Canadian, but it was probably somewhere around $7,000 or $9,000. And I was like, oh my God, that's so expensive. And now I'm just like 111,000. Like, this is a great buying opportunity.
Yeah, totally. I didn't put it in the show notes for this week, but I actually just took advantage of this feature. River, I use River for my dollar cost averaging. We're not sponsored, but we'd love to be. Hi, River. They announced, I think it's called supercharged or whatever. This feature, basically what it does is you set up your recurring buy. So mine, I have set up every 2 weeks to buy. And what it'll do is it tracks the 14-day moving average of Bitcoin. And if the 14-day moving average of Bitcoin is minus 1% or more, it'll automatically buy more Bitcoin than what you had originally configured it to. So I think you set up a percentage. So I think I personally, I set up if the moving average is lower, buy 25% more than what I would have normally. So that's kind of cool.
That's really
it's
cool.
A way to you're still DCAing, but it's still kind of set it and forget it, and you still are having the opportunity to buy the dip a little bit. So yeah, it's kind of nice. I'll give them a shout out for that. That's cool.
Yeah, they're building some cool stuff. I'm honestly so jealous that I won't have access to their platform. I tried to sign up and then I obviously got geo-blocked, but
yeah, well, we're going to talk a little bit about more about exchanges and not having access to certain platforms. There's some news this week that just dropped this morning with CZ, so I want to talk about that a little bit. But before we get there, definitely want to cover all of the public company Bitcoin purchases. There was not too many of them this week. Kind of the usual suspects in here that we see every week, but we'll start there. The first one is, of course, Strategy. They bought 168 Bitcoin. They now hold 640,418 Bitcoin.
Nice. Then we have Smarter Web Company. They bought 10 Bitcoin. They now hold 2,660.
It's a smaller one. We had Capital B, which I think is the branded as the French MicroStrategy.
Yep.
They bought 6 BTC. They now hold 2,818. So still some catching up to do.
And then we have Germany on the map. They get their first Bitcoin treasury company through Affinio.
I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah.
They invested 3 million euros into Bitcoin and plan to buy 10,000 by 2027.
Great to see more European companies getting on the map. And yeah, first German Bitcoin treasury company. So yeah, I'd love to see it. I think it was on Monday, we had a really crazy AWS outage that rocked the traditional world, I guess, in terms of like Slack wasn't working and there's all this stuff that wasn't working, including some blockchains, which, we don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much, because the moment that you start saying, oh, we didn't go down or we didn't get hacked, that's the moment that you do go down or get hacked. But
yeah,
Stacks was up and some others were not. So we'll take the victory.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how maybe chains adapt to this in the future. Maybe they're forcing their validators not to run on big clouds, because a lot of them did get called out. It definitely affects sort of their credibility, but agreed. Yeah, you don't want to shout it out too much that we didn't go down, but we did not go down over at Stacks.
Yeah, it at least demonstrates that Stacks isn't powered by AWS. But yeah, it's important, right? Because you could run a Bitcoin node or any kind of node. You could run an Ethereum node and you could run it on AWS, and you could have a lot of different people with different AWS accounts running their own nodes. And it brings the decentralization question into it, right? Technically you have all these different people that are all running their own nodes, but if they're all running it on this one centralized platform, is that really decentralized? Even though the number of nodes could look high, that doesn't really tell the whole story. So it's a good stress test for blockchains this week.
I've been reading a little bit about it, and people are saying there's better, cheaper, maybe not better, but cheaper options around the world for hosting infrastructure that are, obviously cheaper than Amazon and Azure and stuff. But I obviously don't have good recommendations. But it's just interesting why people choose AWS. I guess it's just for its reliability generally.
I think, this is my Microsoft knowledge coming out. So AWS, I think, kind of just had first mover advantage. They were kind of the first ones to really popularize the cloud and having all your stuff on the cloud. And then, later on you had Microsoft came out with Azure. Google has GCP, Google Cloud Platform, and you have, all these big tech companies now pretty much have their sort of version of that. I am seeing though, I think just because technology is getting better, things are getting cheaper. I think more people are moving towards more on-prem setups now, which basically means they're hosting their own infrastructure rather than relying on some of these, or maybe they're doing a hybrid kind of setup, which also helps with things like fault tolerance. If something goes down, there's another place that they could point their domain to that is still up, right? And having more distributed setup rather than putting all your eggs in one basket on something like AWS.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's been a lot of high profile AWS outages in the past. Cloudflare is another one. Whenever Cloudflare has a major outage, they power a lot of domain infrastructure.
Yeah.
So you've also seen, a lot of that in the past as well. But it's just a good kind of reminder of decentralization. Another win for ordinals as well, right? Or anything that's on chain. A lot of NFTs use things like AWS to, host the images there. So it's just a good reminder of kind of some of the benefits of things like on-chain information, like ordinals and others. So we survived for now.
My Amazon Prime account did not survive for that whole day. Shipping.
Yeah, Robinhood was down.
Yeah,
there's a lot of major things that were down.
I saw an estimate that it was costing $75 million per hour that it was down.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'd imagine that they have some crazy terms of service that really protects them. But I'd imagine so many companies are chomping at the bit to sue Amazon whenever a big outage like that happens.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, moving on, this one was kind of cool. A little bit of a follow up to something that we covered several months ago, but there was this article that came out. I think it was, I lost the link here, but I think it was in Business Insider or somewhere like that. Basically talking about how a lot of Bitcoin whales are moving from native BTC to iBIT and other ETFs. So we covered this back in August. There was this regulatory change in the US that basically opened the door for large investors to convert their native BTC into an ETF in like an exchange, like a Fidelity or somewhere like that, in like what they called like an in-kind transaction. And there's a lot of benefits to this. Obviously, there's the con of, you're not holding your own keys anymore, but for large Bitcoin whales or institutions, there's certainly a lot of benefits to plugging your Bitcoin into traditional rails. Allows you to get loans, have better kind of access to beneficiaries, things like that you wouldn't be able to if you were just like holding your own keys. And there's no like tax, I guess, impact by doing this. So you can kind of convert very easily over to this and then benefit from like the TradFi rails. And according to the article, BlackRock has facilitated over $3 billion of these conversions. And that's just BlackRock. There's other, ETF providers as well. But that's a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's a big move for like people who've been holding Bitcoin for so long. I mean, they've been through like all the cycles, all the narratives, and to move it into an ETF, it's kind of sad to see. But I understand it. Like at a certain point, you have to do what like makes sense for your money, but it definitely defeats the purpose a little bit.
It does. This is probably going to be like one of the most controversial opinions that I have.
Here we go.
If I had the ability to deposit my Bitcoin into something like a Fidelity and have it not be like a tax, loss or whatever, right? I could just deposit it in there and have somebody like Fidelity be in charge of custody, and I could withdraw it when I, want to, for something like a very long-term storage, to not have to worry about like private keys or losing my private keys or like my house catching on fire, and losing stuff, like to have like that, trust, I guess, like given to something like Fidelity for that stuff. It's kind of enticing, honestly. Like, I mean, obviously DeFi is great. We love DeFi. We love being able to, be self-sovereign. And perhaps for me, living in the US, right, it's easy for me to say something like that. If you live, in another country, it might be a different story. But for the average person that maybe isn't as tech savvy, doesn't understand what private keys are. For my mom, for example, right? Like, do I trust her with like holding on private keys? And if something happens to her, being able to pass those private keys onto me in a legally compliant way, and like dealing with all of that, financial tax burden, like kind of makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Honestly. As long as you can go back and bring it back.
Just kidding.
To, to your own,
No,
to your own private keys.
I understand your take. I was just having a conversation the other week, like with my boyfriend's mom, and we were talking about like if something happens to me or him, like how do you go about basically recovering our Bitcoin, and explaining the process was like, this is absolutely not easy for the everyday user, and it's actually quite terrifying to be explaining, like you have to hold these words, and here's where you should look if something happens to me, like here's where you should try to find these words, and the whole concept. And she was like, okay, like, sounds a bit scary, but I totally understand. And also, maybe if I was in that position where I was holding like that large amount of money, I would probably still self-custody a good chunk of it, and then, maybe look to like a larger credible institution to custody the rest. I feel like that is probably a good strategy as well. It's kind of like the same thing as if you're holding Bitcoin in multiple hardware wallets. So in case you lose the private keys to one, you're still kind of distributed across different wallets. But at the same time, now that just means more and more private keys to hold on to. So it's kind of like this ever-growing problem. But there are like solutions, wallets like BitKey, for example. It's, built. And we're going to talk into another solution as well, Trezor and Ledger. But yeah, it's kind of like a strategy that you really need to think through. And honestly, it's a reminder to myself also to like really think through my strategies and securities.
Yeah, I think you can have like a very, very strong like personal, setup in terms of like how you manage your keys, and it can be like good. But it's like when you start talking about like the estate planning stuff, and like if you're really trying to grow this generational wealth, like how do you pass it down? And like that's where it gets complicated, right? That the system might work for you, but the likelihood that it's going to work for like somebody else and they're going to like be able to understand it, like that's where it starts to get more complicated.
Yeah. Especially the older generation. I totally understand that.
Yeah. It is a good segue to go back to holding your own keys in a good way. We had a couple announcements from both Trezor and Ledger this week. I'm going to share my screen just so we can take a look at these cool little devices. The first one is the Trezor Safe 7, which is the new generation of kind of their flagship device. You can pre-order it now. It's $249. The big thing with this is they're advertising the Safe 7 as having the first ever auditable open source secure element. So that's actually the little chip that's in there that is holding the private key and making sure that somebody can't extract the private key from the device. It's made by this company called Tropic Square. The little chip itself is called the Tropic 01. And Tropic Square is owned by Satoshi Labs, who is also the parent company of Trezor. So there's they're making their own thing ultimately, but it is auditable and open source. As Bitcoiners, we of course love to see that. And it's a nice looking little device. It's like super thin. It like magnetically charges. It's available in Bitcoin Orange, which you love to see. And it looks like a little Apple device or something. It's pretty cool.
It's pretty sleek.
Yeah. Super thin. We also had Ledger is sharing this. It's not their flagship, but it is still a nice little device. It's the Ledger Nano, the Gen 5. This one has an e-ink display, which is really nice compared to if you're somebody like me that has like a really old Ledger that's like the tiny little USB size with a tiny little screen. This one has a nice larger screen on it. It has NFC, which is also very cool. I think the only thing that this doesn't have that I wish that it did have is wireless charging. So you just have to plug it in through USB to charge. But it's a lot cheaper than the Trezor. It's $179 compared to something like the Nano X. I think it's only like maybe $30 or $40 difference. To go from that to something with a larger display is pretty cool.
Nice.
Hardware making moves.
All right.
I've never owned a Trezor, but I know that they're very well regarded. Maybe the Safe 7 will be my first one. We'll see.
Yeah,
I'm pretty happy with my BitKey though.
I'm like, I've been wanting to like buy a new one. And BitKey's been on my mind. I've used Ledger and Cold Card in the past, but BitKey, like it just seems super easy. And so I feel like I want to try that experience and maybe like use that as, like a recommendation to people who, it just seems kind of like the easiest on-ramp for hardware wallets, but I would have to play around with it to really judge that.
Yeah, I can't talk highly about it enough. I really like it. I mean, I guess the only downside is it's like, or upside, depending on how you look at it, is that it is like Bitcoin only. So like there's no like stack support or anything like that. You have to use Ledger for that, but or Rider. Shout out to our friends over there. But maybe in the future we'll see. But yeah, the inheritance feature also like very cool.
That's pretty cool.
This one almost didn't make it. Just dropped like an hour before the show. But Trump has officially pardoned CZ, which is, I don't know if it's surprising. I think there was like talks that this was going to happen. There was speculation that this was going to happen, but still really big news. I think CZ, for those that don't, CEO of Binance, or was a CEO of Binance. He was, I think, originally charged, mostly the charges were related to like KYC AML violations. Basically, they were just letting anybody and everybody sign up for Binance accounts back in the day, and they ultimately had to pay the price for that.
Yeah.
Binance is not available like in the US, for example, but it used to be. I had a Binance account. I was trading on there back in the day, and then until they closed it off. But I think he served 4 months in prison. I had to pay like some hefty fines and fees and stuff like that. But now he's been pardoned as of this morning. I saw this tweet from David Bailey, and I agree with a lot of it. So I wanted to share it or read it out loud here, talking about the news. And he said, Just to say this on the CZ pardon, I believe in equal treatment under the law. Punitive charges against CZ and Binance for what amounts to KYC AML violations were above and beyond anything any banker has been charged with or been held accountable for. And that's certainly true. In the US, like every big bank, Chase or JP Morgan and, Wells Fargo and Bank of America, all these companies, they all pretty much every year get charged for these types of things. And they get slapped with a fine. But, are we seeing Jamie Dimon go to prison? No. So certainly wasn't like equal treatment for something like that. But he does go on to say, and I agree with this too, also feeling that Binance competitors, who were trying to, conduct business very compliantly in the US, think like a Coinbase, for example, right? They couldn't list maybe quite as many tokens as something like Binance could. And so they couldn't grow maybe as fast as something like Binance could. So they were kind of put at a disadvantage by abiding by the rules. And certainly, there's been a lot of change with the Trump administration, with putting things on a more equal playing field. But yeah, when it comes to, he says, when it comes to holding an individual accountable versus a company, we should over-index on protecting America's pioneering and entrepreneurial spirit, which means showing mercy, forgiveness, and second chances. And in his opinion, justice served. So yeah, I think, the punishment maybe necessarily didn't fit the crime by like putting CZ in prison for 4 months. Also kind of funny that it was 4 months because he has like the 4 meme, which is like whenever he says 4, he's talking about like people fudding him or fudding Binance. So
yeah, I wonder like
CZ's free.
How much this has deterred people from building in the US. I mean, I don't know if you're ever able to measure that, but especially, again, like we have a president who's in there for 4 years, and then who knows what happens after that. And so, like, again, we've talked about this many times, but I hope we make enough progress in the 4 years that it's not really a worry again in the future, but we don't really know that.
Yeah. It goes back to, we've talked about it a lot on the show in terms of like a lot of these rules and regulations, they need to actually be like codified into law instead of just the administration saying that they're going to do this and that. I'm like, yeah, that's great for the 4 years that this administration is around, but yeah, what happens afterwards? So, yeah, that's important. Did want to throw it over to you.
Yeah,
this report.
I look forward to this every year. A16z does this annual state of crypto report, and they always have some just like really cool findings to put the whole crypto industry into perspective. So I just pulled some that I thought were quite interesting. So they're estimating that we're currently at about 40 to 70 million active crypto users. That's up from 10 million from last year. And they distinguish this between crypto owners. So they estimate that there's 719 million crypto owners. So almost 1 billion people owning crypto around the world. But only about 70 of them are like actively using crypto. That's pretty big numbers.
That's big. That's a big number.
Yeah. This one I was shocked and not shocked about. So Hyperliquid and Solana account for 53% of revenue generating economic activity today. So they basically make up all of the economic activity happening in crypto, which is obviously a huge jump because it used to be Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm not surprised by Solana, but I am surprised by Hyperliquid, and I think maybe that's just because I'm not super familiar with it, but what's your initial reaction to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Solana is certainly, I feel like, way more mainstream than something like Hyperliquid, but I think Hyperliquid, just because it's designed for such like high throughput and like such fast, trading execution, it would make sense. Maybe there's like a lot of whales on there, that are contributing to that, where Solana is like the people's chain, and like you have this whole huge retail audience that is like contributing very small amounts of revenue. Yeah. But collectively, it's equaling this huge behemoth of revenue generating activity.
Yeah. And then we have the next point that I thought was interesting. Growth is really being driven by 2 big ones, not surprising, stable coins like USDC, USDT. They're processing about 46 trillion in on-chain volume in the last year. And I'll just note that not all of that is like true economic activity. So not all of it is like transaction volume. Some of it is just moving it to different wallets or it's not all payments and settlements. So they're estimating that about 9 trillion of that is just like moving it to different wallets, not necessarily transactions or generating like activity. But you compare that number, so about 35 trillion, to Visa, who does around 14 trillion. That's pretty substantial. And then we have institutions are also driving growth with 175 billion locked in Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs, which is up 160% from last year. So that is pretty cool. And then the last point is just really around like emerging markets and how much they're contributing to crypto growth. So if you look like countries like Nigeria, India, Colombia, I think they have some of like the highest rates of users in the world. And the report says a lot of this is mobile wallet adoption. That industry is booming, but obviously different parts of the world are using crypto in different ways. So I think it was saying like South Korea, Australia, there's a lot of trading volume. But if you look at like the emerging markets, it's very much mobile wallet adoption.
Yeah, and maybe not necessarily India, but like Nigeria, Colombia, like other countries like that also have like very high inflation. So going back to, stable coins, right? The desire to hold something like US dollars instead of their own native currency, definitely more attractive for a lot of other countries out there.
Yeah, exactly. And also just a lot of government corruption too. Like I know like speaking with some folks in the stocks community who are based in, Nigeria and other surrounding countries, it's very challenging for them to basically have a bank account and not be stolen from, or being able to like really maintain your own money and your own property. So using a crypto wallet is definitely very beneficial for areas of the world like this.
Yeah, this goes back to my privileged opinion at the top of the show with trusting Fidelity to hold my Bitcoin. Like you don't get that in a lot of other countries.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very necessary to have that type of stuff.
Totally.
Moving on, this I think is the last thing that we're covering today, but this is like so much money, is crazy. So Coinbase bought Up Only, the Up Only podcast, through the sale of an NFT for $25 million in USDC. It was purchased by like the Coinbase.eth address. And so Up Only had listed this $25 million NFT, which granted the holder or buyer one additional 8-episode season of Up Only, where the hosts, which is Kobe, who has like the Kurt Cobain avatar that we all probably would recognize on Twitter, and Ledger Status would, quote, perform like monkeys, but otherwise would not convey sponsorship rights or obligation to mention the owner's brand on their show. So yeah, so Coinbase.eth made the acquisition. It was confirmed by Brian Armstrong on Monday. I remember the Up Only podcast from being sponsored by FTX back in the day. There was this very famous, I don't know if you remember this or you watched any of this when it was happening, but there was this very famous live stream that they were doing back in the day where like FTX basically collapsed like midstream. So they were like documenting it as it was happening, which is crazy. And then there was eventually like people like Do Kwon ended up appearing on the show. And this was back before, I think this was at the time, like, gosh, I'm blanking on the coin. Terra Luna, I think, had already collapsed, but there wasn't any like charges against him yet. And Martin Shkreli was also on, and Shkreli was in jail, for like some of the stuff that he had done. And he basically told Doe live on the stream that jail was not that bad. And that was just a very, very classic 2021 crypto moment. But yeah, has me speculating if we should offer some sponsors, some good for Bitcoin sponsors for $25 million, and if people would take us up on it.
Seems like a fair starting price. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Just like going back to the whole Do Kwon thing, like there's some seriously like memorable quotes. Like I was writing something the other day and I would type the word like deploy, or I typed the word deploy and I was like, steady lads. So like it's just little things like this, like his tweet where he's like deploying capital.
Steady lads is an all-timer. That's
so
an all-time
good.
Classic.
Yeah. I think I do remember that stream, or not the stream, but I just remember seeing clips of it.
Yeah.
I was like, this is peak crypto.
Yeah. What a crazy time that was, everything blowing up.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps it up for the news this week. Bit of a slow news week, short week for us, recording on a Thursday. If you're still here, if you're still listening, thank you for being here. And if you're listening on the podcast, give us a rating. Let us know how much you love the show. We got to do something to, I don't know, got to do something to like incentivize like ratings. We'll have to think about that.
Yeah, we'll do some things on that for sure.
Start reading the reviews off on the show at the end of the show or something like that.
Yeah.
We want to read your reviews. Let's do that.
Perfect.
Yeah, go follow us, goodforbitcoin.com. That's where that'll take you to subscribe to the show. We're on YouTube. We're live streaming on YouTube. I didn't check if we were live streaming on pump.fun. I don't know how our token is doing. We'll maybe check back up on that next week.
We need to
I'm not signed in
capital
to my account. Yeah, steady lads. I don't know, anything else before we wrap?
No, that's it. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
All right. See y'all next week.
See you then.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.